Hello everyone, it is me, GameBang21. Today, we're going to be looking at a very, stupid video. Originally, this video was going to be something completely different on the whole Mudahar thing. Sorry, I was just adjusting my microphone. On the whole Mudahar situation, but that ship has sailed, come back, and then sailed again. But thanks to good old small YouTuber friend, senpai person, King K, I'll call him. King Kunch? I don't know his full name, but I'll just call him King K. King K, like 106 or something like that. And he's a slightly bigger guy than me, but he's around the same, area. Anyway, so we're today going to be looking at the Marvel PC Spider-Man port, Broken Mess, Do Not Buy review, by a man by the name of Dead Metal Media, someone who has sub 10k subscribers and other stuff like that. Now, the reason why I bring this up is, well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but essentially this guy is probably meaning, I'm not too certain, but he sounds a lot of the genuine stuff, and a lot of his whole thing seems to be the contrary from what I've seen of his whole shtick, I guess. But today we're just going to look at his video and how much of a trash dumpster fire it's going to be. I don't think we're going to go through the whole thing. This is going to be just a quick one because after the day I've had, I kind of need some quick one to just kind of make fun of people. And that's how I unwind. So, without further ado, let's get into this.
Marvel Spider-Man on PC is the worst Sony PC port to date. And I do not say that lightly. I say this as a beloved, massive fan of the PlayStation 4 release and the PlayStation 5 release. I've beaten Spider-Man 3 times now. I've beaten the DLCs each twice. I know this game inside and out, and that is why I can come to you as an authority on the topic and state definitively, after spending the first 3 hours with the game, courtesy of an early review code from Insomniac Games, without a shadow of a doubt, without a trace of doubt, both confidently and unfortunately, Marvel's Spider-Man is an absolute broken mess on the PC, and sadly, I did not expect anything less.
Okay. So, there's a lot to break down in that first minute of the video, so let's break it down point by point. First of all, sir, you are not an authority on something just because you are a fan of something. To be very frank, what you are currently trying to use in terms of logical fallacies is an appeal to false authority. I'm gonna be honest with you here and say that unless you are 100% a game developer, someone who has worked on the actual game, someone who has worked within the gaming industry, or heck, even someone who just knows a lot about game design and, game development and the process, and we're very much close with some of the other people, I don't think you can call yourself an authority on this matter. What I mean is, I would never say that I am someone who you can come to as an authority on art. I'm someone who can give advice on what you can do for your own art to improve it, but I never say that I'm an authority on it. I would say that I can give advice out to certain other people, but to be fair, I'm not an authority, and I never claim to be an authority. Again, you are doing a logical fallacy called an appeal to false authority, trying to oversell it. You're then also begging the question and trying to put forward the idea that you 100% have this notion. And this is one of the other things that I brought up earlier, and why I brought up that he is a sub 10k channel, and why he has a lot of the stuff. Now, normally, numbers don't mean jack anything to me. But in this context, he's trying to say that him as a much smaller YouTuber, who, let's say, why wouldn't Spider-Man pair up with, say, someone who's actually played the game that's much bigger than him, like Jacksepticeye or PewDiePie. Well, maybe not PewDiePie, but Markiplier or someone like that. Why would they not pair with someone and give them a creator code? Or heck, any of the other actual reviewers that I actually personally follow. But to be honest, no. I don't think that you can authoritatively say that this thing is a broken, buggy mess until, like, literally anyone else comes out or that the actual embargo comes out. What I can also tell you is that I'm 99% certain that, unfortunately, you just broke a DMCA if that was the case. You would have most likely had to have signed a DMCA to then release this view, and you just broke that, sir. That's a contract, and you could possibly be sued if you are, saying this, which that happens to maybe be true. And third of all, and most importantly and interestingly, we'll get into some of the other things and why it's like a broken buggy mess on PC. Maybe, maybe not, but that's neither here nor there. But in all honesty, show some gameplay. Source site, please. I would love to see that. I would love to see that. Anyway, let's move on.
Sony has an absolutely atrocious track record when it comes to releasing games on the PC.
Let's go through the list, people.
Personally, I just don't think they should bother anymore. We should wait until PS4 emulation catches up. That'll be a much smoother, superior way than playing these broken games.
Okay, so what the fuck do you mean by PS4 emulation catching up? What's weird about that is that I'm 99.9% sure that PS4 emulation has basically been cracked. Mostly at this point. There might be a couple bugs here and there, but PS4 emulation still works better than some of the games on PS4, in my opinion. Not only that, I can't say this for certain, and I'm not going to say this for certain, but I will say that at the very least, emulation is a thing that is cool, and I like the fact that you're bringing up emulation, and here's the weird part. Apparently, since this runs terribly, why the fuck would emulating the PS4's systems, which all that does is trick the game into thinking that it's running on a PS4? How in the holy mother of matrimonial fuck is it possible to emulate a game better than to run it natively on your actual hardware? Like, you're running a completely separate process to then try to run a process that is different than the process you're trying to run through a different software. For some people, like, it doesn't take up a lot of memory, absolutely, sure. But why the hell would I emulate a game that I can get natively on the actual device? That's like saying, oh, I'm going to emulate The Witcher on Wii, rather than, say, buy the actual Witcher on the PC. I'd rather personally buy the actual product on the preferred platform rather than having to emulate it. That's the reason why Nintendo themselves, they've been emulated to death, because their stuff just doesn't come over. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's bad or good, really, on that whole emulation thing, but PS4 emulation is still pretty solid, even to today's standards of almost being as good as PS4. It's just that those consoles haven't been completely out for a long-ass time at this point. But how the fuck does that make any sense? That emulating and doing a completely separate process makes the experience better, rather than having the process being run natively without having to have anything in the background. Like, how does that make any form of sense? If it runs terribly on if it runs terribly on one platform, why would emulating it on the same platform make it any better?
Now, those of you in the comments, those of you who are scratching your heads or concerned, what are the issues, Dead Metal? Well, let me tell you what the issues with the PC port of Spider-Man are. In no particular order, just jotting them down as I went through my first 3 hours of the review copy. This game suffers from an abundance of stuttering. You want to talk like shader compilation issues? This is like next level. Every 3 to 4 seconds, there's a very awkward, very apparent jerkiness, whether or not you're moving the camera, whether or not the character's in the middle of an animation, and it completely undoes this smooth web slinging at that silky, perfect 30 FPS.
Ah, yes, the silky, perfect 30 FPS. Oh boy. Okay. So first of all, 30 FPS is fine. I'm not going to say that it's worse or better than 60 FPS. It technically is worse, but to each their own. I will say, though, that having a game at 30 FPS on my big TV, on my original Xbox 360, basically made my eyes want to be gouged out of my head, and I had massive headaches from it. I got used to them, and my eyes stopped stressing a bunch, but it was still a problem. I've not had that issue with my PC, even though the high frame rates are much, much higher, which I thought would be the case, but that's not the case. If the problem with the stuttering was the problem, maybe look into the game files. Maybe they were installed wrong. If you're saying that it was the shader compilation, again, Steam has the thing to allow you to say, hey, can you look through the game files for me to make sure that everything's running smoothly under the hood? And Steam, 99% of the time, will fix the issue. The 1% of the times that it doesn't is sometimes when the file becomes corrupted. That's usually when a fresh install of the game is more or less possible. But you're saying, oh, well, he got a review copy. If he did, the review copy isn't necessarily the final build of the game. Not fully, anyway. Sometimes there's like a day one patch that fixes a lot of the issues that might be in the review copy that people have talked about. But at the same time, if this is true, which I highly doubt that it is, let's just say that there is a stuttering problem. Just as an example. Now, again, that might not necessarily come down to the game itself. The game itself might be just running fine. If it is the game itself, there's numbers and numbers of fixes to try to fix this. It might be that your PC is not up to snuff, which the PC specs are pretty low. And what's also interesting, we'll get into that in a little bit, this thing is confirmed to be deck verified. So, just wanted to drop that truth bomb there before we continue.
We had on the PlayStation 4. And on top of this, GSync or AMD FreeSync does not solve the issue because it is built into the game engine. This engine was not designed for PC, much like those atrocious ports of Days Gone, Death Stranding, Horizon, and God of War.
Even though all of those games sold millions upon millions of copies, and for Days Gone in particular, made PlayStation reconsider the possibility of them actually getting a sequel. Or at least I hope it did.
At this point, this is clearly a Sony issue. They do not design their games with the possibility of transferring or porting them to other platforms at all.
Hence why they created an entire division to port over their PC games. Hence, PlayStation PC.
It's very clear this is a Sony issue. No Microsoft game that I have ever played on PC has this issue. But let's say you could live with the stuttering, or maybe you cap your FPS at 30 to make it less apparent. Okay, I can see that. You want the cinematic flair. Okay, fine.
Who the fuck caps their FPS at 30 on PC? I've never needed to ever cap my FPS, like ever. I don't know about any of you, but I've never had to cap my FPS. I just leave it at whatever the fuck defaults there is. Usually I'm able to get mostly like 40 to 50, but then again, you have to remember, my PC is a little bit old. It's like 2 to 3 years-ish old, which is old in the sense that I've abused the fuck out of this thing. My original laptop that I used to also run a lot of my games, do a lot of streaming, recording, and other stuff that I'm doing right now, was actually more powerful, and is now like 6 or 7 years old. I'm only now repurposing it to try to make the game, to try to make it like my whole DJ setup thing. So, yeah. But, that's neither here nor there. What you're telling me is, you have these stuttering issues, yet you don't show them. Now, he might deflect and say, oh, well, I can't show it because that breaks laws, or that breaks the DMCA thing. If it breaks a law if it breaks the copyright, that's not fucking true. First of all, things such as fair use exist. Whether it's released or unreleased, certain things like this can get slipped by through this whole situation, and more often than not, this sort of stuff is allowed. Number 2, if you did or did not, if they did copyright strike it, it would technically be false copyright striking, and you'd be able to actually pull it off. More or less. Not always, but sometimes. Number 3, if you can like, where the fuck is the evidence of any of this? Like, you're just talking about it and saying, like, oh, well, this is like blah, 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 blah. So, just, show don't tell sometimes.
You know, there's far bigger issues. I could honestly get over the nausea-inducing stuttering. I really could if it wasn't for the unforgivable, very predictable, very consistent crashes. Now, let's be honest. If you're gaming on Windows, your games are going to crash. That's just what PC gamers... That's what they get. That's what they're used to, right? I'm a PC gamer. My games crash about 3 to 4 times per session. It's par for the course. Everybody knows that if you're going to game on PC, you're going to have to deal with the crashes.
I would say in the entirety of my PC gaming career, I've only ever crashed maybe 10 times. And that's me thinking of the number off the top of my head. And that's probably the maximum from what I can remember. I've maybe have crashed more than times, maybe even crashed like less than that. But around 10 is what I'm thinking. And usually, if I'm having a problem where it's getting those stuttering issues, the whole thing is just kind of like wishy-washy and all weird and stuff, you can fix the problem fairly easily. Again, since this game is on Steam, natively, I might add, in the port, you have a lot of Steam's support stuff. One of Steam's things is, again, I think that if that was the case, the entirety of your game was installed wrong. It just seems that, like, that's the problem here. The stuttering issues, the whole, like, not compiling the stuff correctly. Again, both, it might be that if you did get a review copy, that might be fixed, but at the same time, I don't think you got a review copy and you're just lying out of your ass because you don't show anything. I mean, again, you might say, oh, well, I'm not allowed to show anything. Then why the fuck are you talking about it? If you are, say, under a DMCA of any kind, you wouldn't be able to talk about it, you wouldn't be able to show anything about it. Yet you are here talking and complaining about it. I don't think you got an actual copy of the game. Furthermore, again, this whole thing is just because the game might have been installed wrong. Check with Steam with that. Like, always, my first thing that a person says, like, oh, well, my game's, like, acting up in a weird way. If you're on Steam, Steam handles a lot of really good back-end software that will check the files. And 90% of the time, like, literally 99% of the time, it will fix the issue for you. Because you don't have to go through all the files and figure out, oh, this one's corrupted, I gotta replace this one. Or you don't have to uninstall the game and then wait 3 hours to reinstall the game. You just have to wait about maybe 2-ish hours while Steam kind of searches through your Steam library. And again, it will take the files out that might be corrupted. It will also, like, replace files if they aren't there. It will make sure that your games are running perfectly. If that's the case and your game is installed perfectly, just then try the AMD or GeForce Now whole experience thing. They will figure out, like, what's the best thing for your PC specs. More often than not, you'll be able to click one button, and the entire thing will then work. Maybe you have outdated drivers. You don't need that, but that's very, very, very low on the list. That's like plan Y or something like that. There are a lot of fixes that you could use to fix the problem other than just, like, say, capping your frame rate. Maybe you can, drop the actual fidelity down a little bit. Maybe you can turn VSync off, do all those other stuff. There's a lot of things that you can do that you're just not explaining here.
I have never dealt with crashes of this magnitude. I've never dealt with crashes of this severity. Crashes of this stupidity, mind you, all right? There's more crashes here than the evening after an exam with a bunch of college students hopped up on ADD medication. All right, there's more crashes here than a Demolition Derby. I have played 3 hours of this game. It's about all I could stomach, but I had to get at least to the 3-hour mark because if you've played the game, you know that's when the world really opens up. You're free to tackle the side quests, free to tackle the main objectives. I had no less than 31 crashes in that time. You do the math there, dear viewer. That is averaging over 10 crashes an hour.
If you're having that issue, have seen fix it. It's not that hard. It just sounds like your game was installed wrong. It really does. If your PC is working flawlessly and perfectly, it sounds like the game was installed wrong. If it's not the game and you checked the files and you made sure that everything was copacetic there, maybe it's your PC. Maybe it's out of date. Maybe you're running like on the included thing because the drivers, or you just don't have the correct or you just don't have a graphics card that's good enough. But assuming that you do, and assuming that everything else is happening, it should run fine. If you're still running into those issues, just check the integrity of the files. It might have installed wrong. That's all that I'm saying.
My drivers were updated. I had the NVIDIA game-ready drivers on my RTX 3090 Ti. All right. My rig performs flawlessly otherwise. And the game my Windows was updated.
Hold on. Didn't you mention AMD before? AMD and NVIDIA aren't the same company. What do you mean AMD, like GeForce, whatever, didn't work? If you have GeForce and you have your drivers updated for your NVIDIA card, then, again, maybe use the GeForce experience to try to see what's wrong. Normally, you'd be able to get, like, graphical settings based on what the thing does because it will scan your computer. I'm just saying, there's a lot of fixes here. You're just not telling anyone that. You're just saying you're here to complain.
Right, so any possible thing you could think of other than the very, very ill-begotten excuse, there's a day one patch. Of course there's a day one patch, but it's not going to solve these issues. I am absolutely convinced these issues are buried deep into the heart of the game's code.
Bullshit, it's not going to solve these issues. Bull fucking shit, it's not going to solve these issues. I'm very much aware if you were sent a review copy and you make this aware to them, they will fix it. Again, you're saying like, oh, there was no way that they would be able to do that. I mean, you can fix a lot in a few days if you really put your nose to the grindstone for that. But bullshit, that's not going to be like patched if you have that and if you say that that's correct. Bull fucking shit.
And Insomniac, instead of resolving it, or instead of making an attempt to resolve it by delaying the release of Spider-Man PC, they're just going to shovel it out, and then they're going to forget about it. We've seen this with numerous companies. We saw it with Resident Evil Village until Digital Foundry called them out. We saw it with New World actually catching GPUs on fire. I'm not exaggerating. Go look it up. New World, people's GPUs, especially the EVGA ones, which I unfortunately have, caught on fire because the game's menu screen had an unlocked frame rate, and the GPUs spun up so fast, so hard, the fans were going blazing around the thing caught on fire. Capcom Monster Hunter Rise, terrible port, caused so many issues.
It's just a recurring theme that these developers don't care about the PC market, and Marvel Spider-Man does very remarkably little to change that particular conception.
I mean, again, you just haven't fucking thought about it, have you? You just haven't thought this through. You're thinking like, oh, well, this whole thing is just seemingly bad and a wrong idea. And it's just that you're... Sure, yes, there are games that release broken on PC, absolutely. But they eventually do get fixed. Like the big one that... I'm surprised that, again, you didn't bring this one up, but I'm also happy that you didn't bring this one up. You didn't bring up the whole fact that Arkham City did its thing. And I get that. Arkham City is now fixed, and thank God for that. It in turn just means that you're not understanding your own fucking points here. And I don't understand your fucking point here. Because yeah, the game might release broken. But again, there is, like I've mentioned before, I mentioned that there was a day one patch. I mentioned that your game, specifically your game, could have been installed wrong. Did you check with Steam to validate the files? Validate your fucking files. I cannot put this in any other way.
And, I would almost say, okay, crashes, they're more than PC gamers are used to, but PC gamers are used to crashes. Stuttering, the shader compilation issues that we've seen on Stray, the shader compilation issues that we've seen on the Resident Evil games, the shader compilation issues that we've seen on Ghostwire Tokyo. It's becoming a feature, a touting point, something to look forward to more than anything else.
Shader compilation. Dude, you keep saying that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
I could almost get on board with that. Cap the FPS at 30 to make the stuttering less prevalent. Just be ready to suffer through an abundance of crashes, and then maybe, just maybe, you could have a good experience, right? I mean, I'm not wrong, right? Like, you could get on the same page and you could enjoy the game despite the issues if it wasn't for this fatal flaw that exists in this port that renders the game more or less obsolete.
Buckle the fuck up.
There's a very severe, very legal problem. And that problem is that this game fundamentally is nothing more than a Control-C, Control-V port job of the Batman Arkham games, which were done over 10 years ago, which were done significantly better by a more talented company known as Rocksteady, who proceeded to pump out 3 absolute bangers, finish their trilogy off with the strongest entry thus far, Arkham Knight, universally beloved as the greatest, heralded as the greatest Batman story ever told across any medium. That includes comics, that includes movies, that includes games, that includes it all. Spider-Man, whether you're playing it on the PC, PS4, PS5, PS6, cloud, does not matter, is nothing more than a remnant of the absolute carbon copy fest that Batman Arkham Asylum started back in 2009.
I'm not even going to justify that point with a rebuttal. I'm gonna be honest. I think I'm gonna call it there. This video is already 30 minutes long. Fuck it, we're done. Yeah, so he's probably just gonna go off on how, oh, well, the entirety of this game is different than Arkham Knight, even though, yeah, a lot of it's based on Arkham Knight. But I would say that there is a lot different between Spider-Man versus Batman. While, yes, Batman's fighting style is more grounded, this one is more big and flamboyant and, like, acrobatics-like. Yeah, there's stealth mechanics, but there's stealth mechanics in every fucking game. You could make the notion that Batman was ripping off The Last of Us. In a weird fashion, if you really think about it. But while I'm not going to say that there aren't people that didn't like the Arkham series of video games, and let me just be fair, they're amazing games. All 3 of them are fantastic games. I don't think that the third one was heralded as big and fanatically as he's talking about it. I don't know. I've never really heard that much about it. Past, like, the initial hype phase and past, like, when people were reviewing it and talking about it at its time and point in space. But, in my opinion, I will say this. I think that they are solid 8 out of 10 experiences across the board. And for a trilogy to have a solid 8 out of 10 experiences for all 3 is an accomplishment, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, and I'm not a particularly huge fan of comics, but I do like games, and they are very good games. Even though I haven't played them, I've only really seen things of it, so again, take that for what you will. But the difference here, Mr. Media, is I don't tout my opinion as correct. I tout my opinion as an opinion. You don't. You just wanted to shit on this game for no other reason than to just shit on a game. And that line right there basically sums it up. So, in my eyes, am I excited for the Spider-Man port? Yes, absolutely. God of War, it doesn't really appeal to me personally. The Horizon Zero Dawn, I played it, but it didn't grab me like most other people did. Still a solid game. 6.5 out of 10. in my opinion, just didn't grab me. The story was a little boring to me, and the gameplay felt a little stale. Again, specifically to me and to no one else, this is my opinion. But I'm excited for Spider-Man, because it's one of those games, it's one of those turn off your brain type games, where you can do like a bunch of collecting, a bunch of random fluff and nonsense, and I don't care too much about the Spider-Man story, because it's a Spider-Man story, and I've seen it play out a lot of times, but I'm excited for it, personally. Regardless of whether or not I see it or not. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. This video has been long enough. I really gotta get going. But anyway, guys, my name is GamePenguin21. This video is a heaping pile of hot garbage and a piece